So, one thing you brought up was that Godzilla's kind of like the Superman for Japan with the zeitgeist and all that. Which I see where you're coming from, but my question is, isn't Astro Boy more of the Superman and Godzilla kind of akin to that as well?
Well, Tetsuo Natomu, which is Astro Boy, isn't really the Superman in the sense of what he means to the country. Sure, he's the Superman in the sense of, like, yes, he's got a lot of the same powers, like super speed, super strength, all that other stuff. But in what he means to Japanese people, no.
Well, my point is more like Astro Boy is kind of the zeitgeist for the whole anime manga industry, insofar as Superman is kind of the zeitgeist for the comic and a lot of the animation industry. I mean, not as much, but I mean, there's a lot of early Superman animation, all that. And Godzilla is very much his own thing, but it's more of a, like, subgenre.
Well, zeitgeist meaning that is German, and it means ghost of the nation. Geist is German for ghost, and then Zeit is a word that we don't really have in English. It more or less means like feeling of nationalism or something. So when I use that term, I mean literally that it's usually zeitgeist is used in the sense of like, hey, here's the feeling of a country at any given moment. So when it comes to something being ingrained in the cultural zeitgeist, meaning ingrained in the soul of a nation, you would have certain things, and certainly Tetsuo Natomu or Astro Boy would be ingrained in the Japanese mindset. But the reason why I said Superman specifically is because Superman is synonymous with America. If you look at any comic, for example, like one of my favorites is the Bosnian comics that DC published in the 90s with Superman in them to help spread awareness of landmines all throughout Bosnia after the war. But in that comic, even if you ever can track down translations of it, it's actually a pretty decent comic. It's not great, but it's 90s Superman. But the point is if you read it, Superman is still very American in it. He's not Bosnian. He's American.
Right.
And it's the same idea. Godzilla is Japanese. He's not anything else. And so when you say Astro Boy, yes, it's certainly like Astro Boy was a leading thing in Japanese animation and Japanese storytelling style during that period of time. But Godzilla, to me, represents the same thing that Superman does. If you were to say, like, Astro Boy, what would he be? He might be like the Green Lantern of Japan. In the sense of...
I gotcha.
Yeah. So that's why I say Superman, because Godzilla is as important to the Japanese as Superman is to Americans. That's why you can never kill him. That's why you can never get rid of him. That's why he'll always come back. Because to do that would be... It's like killing a national icon. You can't do it.
Except when they do kill Superman or Godzilla.
Well, right.
Which leads to the last film we just watched...
Yes.
Godzilla versus...
Destroyer!
Which, Destroyer, he was telling me, apparently in the translation, it's supposed to be Destroyer, but not supposed to be because, was it just the company or someone in particular said, no, it's Destroyer?
Well, if you ever watch the AVGN Cinemassacre reviews, he talks about this to a very tiny degree, but it's true. When it comes to Godzilla... so they had Godzilla versus Destroyer, and in Japanese you have hiragana, katakana, and kanji. Katakana is the approximation of English words in Japanese. I'm sort of paraphrasing, so Japanese language freaks don't freak out on me. But they're more or less trying to take an English word and adapt it to Japanese sounds and sound styles. So when you have katakana, it's kind of, like I said, adapting that word. For example, the Japanese word for television is terebi, which is like televi, in English. So they said destroya, meaning destroyer. But when the translators actually got a hold of it and they went back to Toho and said, hey, Toho, did you mean destroyer? Toho actually said, no, we meant destroya. And so they translated it like that. And that's how that happened.
Yeah. So Destroya was the one we watched. That was the Godzilla versus movie that we watched. Because basically you're saying there's two kinds of Godzilla movies. There's the man versus Godzilla, which is more horror-esque, you know, man versus monster. Whereas the versus movies are monster versus monster, and then humans win, lose, no matter what.
Right.
And so, in this one you see Godzilla die by fucking freeze ray craziness. Spoilers. Masers.
It came out in 1996. If you haven't seen it yet, it's your problem.
Masers.
So we should explain that real quick before we go any further.
You talk about that. I'm getting another beer.
Okay. Well, hurry, because it's not going to take me long.
It's right there.
So anyway, in Godzilla, they don't fire lasers at anyone. For no good explained reason. For whatever.
Is the IPA good?
Yeah.
Okay.
They call lasers masers in the Godzilla film. They never explain why. They never give any sort of actual reason. It just is. Which is something that a lot of people can't get past in Godzilla. And Godzilla fans adore. It's that idea of things are the way they are because Godzilla says so. And I like that, but... You do know this is going on the internet, right?
All the things I record do.
Alright, so anyway... sorry to take that tangent, but yeah, in the case of Godzilla vs. Destroyer, which we just watched, Godzilla does die for the second time. He dies in the original 1954 version, and then in every single version after that, he miraculously comes back and then just is a fact of life after that. They bring him back in different ways. Like I said, in 1991, they brought him back as time travel. In 1956, when they made Godzilla Raids again, they brought him back through plot device. I mean, just... he was back.
But for the comic book angle, at the end of this movie, there's son of Godzilla. What do they call him?
They call him Baby Godzilla or Godzilla Jr. So,
well, Goiza, not Goiza. What?
Godzuki is what
Godzuki. That's what it was.
Which is not what he's called in these films, but in the original 1960s and 70s films, he was called Godzuki.
And that's what it was called in the Hanna-Barbera cartoon, right?
Yes, well, that was the American translation. In the Japanese, they called him Godzilla Jr. And when they brought him over to America, they decided he can't be called Godzilla Jr., he needs to have a name, so they called him Godzuki.
So when Godzilla dies, some energy fucking transfers...
In Godzilla vs. Destroyer, Godzilla melts down. His heart is like a nuclear reactor. That's what they've been saying throughout the movie series.
Because science.
Godzilla melts down, and so whenever that happens, Godzuki, or Godzilla Jr., or as they call him in the actual movies, Baby, absorbs the energy from his dying father and becomes the new Godzilla. And the final shot of the film is Godzilla in this smoky haze, and it's actually Godzilla Jr., and you see him fully grown with his spines on his back, fully grown, and he's exactly the height he needs to be. So it's the idea that Godzilla can never truly be killed and that the genre will always carry on.
But it's also very akin to, like, the legacy idea. So, like, in some ways the title's passed on.
Yes.
And so it's interesting because it's continuity here, but I mean, you see with any continuity constraints, these kinds of tropes come through. And it's not just superhero comics, it's Godzilla movies. It's, I mean, in some ways, I mean, not this particular trope, but I mean, like, James Bond movies. Like, that sort of deal where, in order to move forward, there's certain things that seem to have to happen. With continuity resets and moving forward, but also having that base.
Right.
And then this is one way that manifests through spines, is the way that it signifies with Godzilla, which is
right
weird.
It's true.
Is there any other notes on that movie?
On Godzilla vs. Destroyer?
Right.
The one other thing I wanted to mention about it is, so part of the thing that makes it important is it ties back to the original 1954 film because the thing that originally kills Godzilla is what's called the oxygen destroyer, which is a molecular disassembler weapon.
Science!
Yes, it's very much science, because they never explain anything about how it works. It just sort of does.
Shit.
And it's like, it looks like Pikachu attacking things, as Matt was very keen to notice. There's electricity involved, which there shouldn't be, and it's awkward. Anyway, point is, it's a thing, and it happens. In 1954, Godzilla dies because of that, because you can't hit him with a nuclear bomb, because that doesn't make sense. He would just absorb the energy and he'd be fine. So they have to hit him with something else. So you hit him with the oxygen destroyer, which kills the original Godzilla. Well, how did they kill Godzilla in 1996? The oxygen destroyer, as far as we know, demolecularizes everything it touches. Except Precambrian organisms.
Which I was just pointing out, everything mutated past Precambrian is
mutated Precambrian.
Which is pretty much every animal on the planet now.
Yeah, so science. Anyway, point is, Destroya, what makes him so threatening to Godzilla is because he is a being that is mutated by the oxygen destroyer as opposed to destroyed to it.
Well, and then also at first he's not Godzilla sized, which Godzilla originally, the original Godzilla was
50 meters.
50 meters because the buildings were so high then. And then
when in 1984 the skyscrapers in Tokyo got a lot bigger. So for practical reasons they said if we want to make Godzilla imposing or scary, we need to make him taller. So they made him 100 meters tall, so 300 feet.
So Destroya is like alien-sized monster, like from the Alien movies, but except there's 5 of them. And then, in true Japanese fashion, they fucking hook up.
They Voltron this shit.
To become... Is there a name for it? Mega Destroyer, Ultra Destroyer?
It's just called Destroya.
Super Saiyan Destroya?
It's just Destroya.
That's disappointing.
I know. Anyway, the point is they all combine and they become a bigger version of the same monster.
Which... Wait, do they have wings when they were smaller?
No.
So when you get big, you get wings. Because fucking Red Bull.
In any case, so that's...
Is that movie?
Yeah, that's Godzilla vs. Destroya.
Okay. And